We assess the state of the constitutional debate with the journalist and pro-independence campaigner Ruth Wishart and the former Conservative advisor Eddie Barnes, who now works for the pro-UK think tank Our Scottish Future. Ruth, we got a date today from the Scottish Government, October next year. Well, what's your reaction?
Well, I'm slightly surprised, but not nearly as surprised as all the unionist commentariat who kept saying and have been saying consistently for 2 years that there's absolutely no possibility of a referendum by the end of 2023. It may not happen, of course, but actually the fact that Angus Robertson felt able this morning to say it was going to be in October 2023, I think was a cause for celebration on folks on my side of the fence.
Yeah, no celebration from you though, Eddie. October next year, what do you reckon?
Well, look, I mean, I just don't think this is quite where the Scottish population is. Never mind, I mean, you know, Ruth talks about unionists versus nationalists in this. I'm not entirely sure this is where most people in Scotland are. I mean, we spoke to, you know, as our think tank, we spoke to a lot of people, both yes and no, about this. It's absolutely right to say that people do not want a referendum taken off the table. They're very, you know, perfectly, both yes and no supporters very keen to kind of talk about this more. But I just don't think they're happy about being kind of rushed into something. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if this was to happen, there would be a referendum campaign starting tomorrow, maybe starting right now, when we don't know what the arguments are around independence. When, in fact, my side on the pro-union side hasn't actually set out its positive case yet. And I just think that kind of rushing into this, I think it's, to be honest, I think it's more of a kind of ploy, you know, ahead of a general election campaign, which is definitely coming, to kind of muster the troops.
Well, a lot to unpick there, Ruth, but what about Eddie's point? You know, is the Scottish Government in step with what the majority of people want? Because an Ipsos SCV poll 2 weeks ago said just 32% of people wanted a referendum next year.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. But I mean, I'm greatly amused by Eddie suggesting that we've been rushed into this. My goodness, rushed into it. We've been hanging on for weeks and months and years waiting for something to happen since the Brexit vote, because the Brexit vote changed the planet we were living on. We're all living in a different planet now. We're living in planet Boris. We're living in planet Brexit. We're living in a totally different world from 2014. And, you know, let's just remember that when they passed the Northern Ireland Act, they said there couldn't be a poll on reunification before 7 years had passed between them. I mean, so we've been, what, 8 years and still counting? So I don't think we're rushing into anything. I think the constitutional logjam will only be sorted once we have this vote.
Well, what's your response to that? So much has happened in 8 years.
And I agree with you. Look, I didn't support Brexit either. I was on the Remain side of the fence. What my reflection of this is, you know, what we look back on Brexit is that that was a referendum that was kind of charged through. People didn't know what the two sides were on that. The same thing applies right now. And it strikes me as odd that, you know, the SNP, which has, you know, spent a lot of the last 6 years talking about the mistakes of Brexit, the problems that were caused there, the fact that the country went into what Nicola Sturgeon called a blind Brexit. Well, it just strikes me that we're kind of making, or we're risk making the same mistakes, when I think there could be a much wider debate held on this. You know, I think Nicola Sturgeon is going to stick out some arguments around independence over the coming months. That's fine. Let's have a look at those. I think we on the pro-union side need to do more to set out a positive argument there too. You know, do we need a referendum to kind of discuss this? I'm not sure we do. We on the pro-union side are keen to kind of, you know, push those arguments forward right now and try and build a better UK right now, rather than having to wait around for these kind of constitutional rows.
And Ruth, how is it going to be delivered?
Well, can I just respond quickly to Eddie?
Yeah,
I mean, the idea that we're going to be building a better UK is for the birds. The UK is going to hell in a handcart at the moment. We're being run by a crowd of shysters who are, you know, breaking international treaties like there's no tomorrow. I don't want to be a part of that, because so long as we're part of the Westminster system, we're complicit in all of these things. I mean, the idea that we could send asylum seekers to Rwanda, it just makes me sick to the pit of my stomach. And I'm sure that's the case with a lot of Scottish folks. As for how it's going to be run, well, the thing is that it's always said that it's not going to be possible unless Boris grants a Section 30 order. And of course, there's no prospect of that happening. However, what we've never actually addressed is the fact that hasn't ever been tested in the courts. We do not know for sure that we require a Section 30 order in order for Holyrood to pass a referendum bill and to proceed to a referendum. So that's something that is as yet untested. And even if the courts throw it out, I can't imagine that that's going to go down well with the Scottish populace.
Well, Eddie, it hasn't been tested. How do you think this might play out?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I guess that argument will be played out in the courts. What I think the SNP seems to be suggesting now is that they might just charge ahead regardless of that. Which I think would be a mistake, and I think that most people in Scotland would see that as a mistake. I mean, it seems to me that it's almost like a kind of, they're acting like a kind of football team that's kind of ringing up the opposition, saying, right, we're playing on this date, we'll play at home, we'll pick the ref, and we don't really care if you turn up or not. I mean, I just don't think that's a serious way to go about democracy.
Ruth, what do you think the big issues will be this time?
Well, the big issues, of course, are going to be largely the ones that there were there before in some regards. I mean, there will have to be a decision made on the Scottish currency, though arguably not until after the referendum, perhaps before. There will have to be a decision made, of course, on trade with the rest of the UK, which is a big issue, certainly. I agree with that, though it's quite interesting that in Northern Ireland, which is still part of the single market, all the business community, most of the Assembly and the Chambers of Commerce all think it's a brilliant idea to still be in the single market. So if Scotland can do a deal where it becomes, again, part of Europe, I think all of these other issues will be less important in the longer term. But, at the end of the day, one of the things that came out yesterday for me when I read through the paper, it wasn't saying like they did at breakfast. Okay. They said at Brexit. They didn't say there's going to be sunlit uplands tomorrow morning. They said there's going to be challenges. Okay. There certainly will be challenges. But speaking as a Scottish voter, I don't want Boris in charge of my future.
Let's let Eddie just finish this. You said earlier that the pro-UK group needs to make a more positive argument this time. How would you do it?
Well, I just think we know what we can't do is just sit there and say, accept the status quo. I think we should be on the side of how do we actually renew and change the United Kingdom. I think the United Kingdom is far too centralised. I think if we can actually demonstrate that we want to change and renew the UK, that is actually in line with a lot of what Scots want, including a lot of yes voters.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us.